Okay, the recording is already ongoing, and I have to close two windows here to see. And I have a number of notes here that I would like to share with you as long as we then go along our second lecture, which will touch upon more on the progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals through the lens of evolutionary economic geography. And I will also, the housekeeping rules. I will track the time here, 2 parts, 40 plus 40 with 10 minutes break. And although I have shared with you some publications on evolution economic geography and the nexus approach, towards the end, this progress towards the operationalization of the Sustainable Development Goals through economic geography is very much the result of my own assessment. So do not expect to find it stated in one publication. And it's the beauty of being able and having the freedom to explore the content of this lecture. So that's those slides at the end. They are the combination of different publications. So you will not see them written in that form in one publication. That's why it's important to come to the live lectures or watch the video recordings later on at home. So 23 participants, I guess some of you are busy with other modules, maybe in person, and without the possibility of watching them back. So as I said earlier, we will go a little bit on the organization, but more related with a seminar because of the number of changes in terms of dates. And we'll dive deep into the defining evolutionary economic geography, and we'll have our break, and then we'll enter more the component of the sustainable development goals. And most of you are certainly already familiar with sustainable development and how we came to this stage, and the number of protocols, agreements, alliances involving different countries that help to operationalize the Agenda 2030. So all of this is the result of this collective endeavor. And the important here, and then I underline one of the aspects of my notes, is this component again of the social constructivism of the learning and of the concepts I bring to you. Evolution economic geography is very much the result of a number of researchers, and not that many, mainly in Europe, that have been focused on developing conceptually or theoretically economic geography, in which the time historical processes play a determining role, and also the collective endeavor of a number of policymakers, experts, governments that came together to prepare this framework known now as sustainable development goals. And certainly all of you that are in this master on sustainable development, society, and science, you are all certainly very concerned to hear what the decisions that will come at the end of this week from Glasgow. And these elements are interestingly important, and they all have a component, an economic component that is relevant for economic geographers. So I've been using this all art group quite a lot with sometimes a small message, others more message that required you to change maybe your agenda as well. So I think it's a very useful tool to reach out to you without bothering you too much with massive emails. But if at some point you find these too massive, or if this makes you uncomfortable, so I'm here to accumulate different perspectives and different ways of thinking. And then if you think this is too massive, then please write me an email, and then I will change that approach. And the highlights of that, and if you want to talk to me face to face, I mean virtually, as I am not in Kiel at the moment, just drop me an email and we can set up a meeting any day of the week except on Wednesdays, as I have other teaching assignments to do. Highlight of that group in the past week since the last lecture are these new dates here. I forgot. Okay, the recording is ongoing. Are the new dates of the collective presentation in February 2022. So I was asked to change the dates because of a number of clashes with other seminars. So please book these dates on your agenda, on your schedule, and because the participation is compulsory. And again, if we will use the entire Thursday, the entire Friday, and part of Saturday, depends of the number of students submitting an essay in English to me. So the SSE students and international students, maybe again, we only need one Thursday, or maybe we need Thursday and Friday morning. These again will depend. This will depend. So sometimes I'm looking at you directly in the camera that is up there on the top of my screen. Sometimes I look at the corner. Someone wants to intervene. I'm not seeing the hands here. Charlotte? No? Okay, was again some parallel conversation, which also happened earlier in my other module. Okay, if someone wants to intervene, please write on the chat or say something. Okay, that's the highlight. And again, here I shared it with you, and then one of you asked me to provide more specific literature before the lectures. I will be doing this every Friday before the forthcoming lecture, and I shared with you 3 articles. 2 of them are working papers. The one led by Robert Hassink and one led by Ron Bosman, 2 researchers, 2 economic geographers devoting considerable time to exploring evolutionary economic geography. And these are, which I consider easy readings in terms of evolutionary economic geography. So they are working papers. There are already publications in highly reputed journals from these authors regarding evolution economic geography, and I shared with you one published in Nature Sustainability, a top journal, a multidisciplinary journal touching upon geography, environmental science, land use planning aspects as well. And I'm trying to underline here the key message of these articles, and you can also, if you found something interesting, that you can raise your voice and intervene. So the first one, led by Robert Hassink, I think makes a clear distinction between what it takes to do relational economic geography, to conduct research within relational economic geography, and what are the distinctive elements between relational economic geography and evolutionary economic geography. And both, this is my take home from the article, that both acknowledge the evidence of economic action, of economic processes, if you will, in the context specific, so in the spatial specific context of a particular territorial area, and how structures in terms of social and institutional relations impact these economic actions, these economic processes, or the organization of the economic landscape. The another one, more on evolutionary economic geography. I'm listening, Frida. You have your microphone open?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Yep, all right. Set. And but if you want to intervene, of course, you are free to intervene. The second one, led by Ron Bosman, points out some of the traditional topics in evolutionary economic geography: industrial clusters, networks, urban and regional development from an economic perspective, the role of the institutions, and how co-evolution impact these industrial dynamics in regions. And the meaning of this co-evolution easily simply explained is that the evolution in one industry can help others to evolve. Let's say that an example here for the evolution on batteries for mobile phones, for example, it certainly paved the way for the incorporation of batteries in the transportation industry, in the automobile sector, maybe in the in bicycles as well. So there are components in the use of batteries in the devices that certainly were helpful, at least as sort of starting point in the practical terms, to help other industries to evolve. And there are several other examples that we can find research on how the developers in one region, in one industry, help the developments in others. So they talk about the co-evolution. The paper on the Nexus approach, less on economic geography, but more on sustainability, enhances that or calls that to truly promote the Nexus approach have a potential. They also involve some challenges, and they are capable, or they offer the possibility to promote integrated planning, management, and governance of territories, and then they can help them to enter a sustainable development path. And what they highlight, I think that's a common message across these three papers, that in evolutionary economic geography, nothing happens without the engagement or the involvement of a number of actors in a specific territory, in a specific geography. And these actors, they are public, they are private, and they have different negotiation capacities. Okay, you may understand this. And there are within industrial clusters, they are not capable of standing by themselves. They evolve within networks. They need suppliers across the world to fulfill that industrial production. Within the sustainability approach, within the Nexus approach, tell us that this multidisciplinary, this multi-governance, looking at issues across scales, is essential to solve global challenges. So there is a certain connection involving these three recommended articles, and I think the beauty of this second lecture is precisely how we can think or can use a core concept within economic geography in current times, evolution, economic geography, and sustainability. And after conducting research within sustainability for the past 2 years, I found this Nexus approach a valuable contributor to link economic geography and sustainability. Would you like to make any comment regarding the publications? Have you read it? And if you read it, do you have questions or issues you would like to raise? Please feel free to comment. Anyone? Okay, if not now, do not feel the stress to or the force to really come with a question. Feel free to intervene any other time further on, maybe at the end, when we really grasp a little bit about evolutionary economic geography. Again, I mentioned in the first slide, this is a collective endeavor towards the future, both in terms of evolution of the concept of evolutionary economic geography, and as well as in terms of sustainability and how we can now, precisely in this exact day, use a framework to help to operationalize sustainable development. And there is a considerable evolution in terms of ways of thinking. If we go back to the climate conference in Rio de Janeiro in 1991 to what we have these days. So we have a solid, well elaborated, still contested sustainable development goals that can be taken as a framework to pave the way towards the future, a future that we want it to be more sustainable. And the collective effort, all these publications, and most of them, they underline this multidisciplinary. If you remember this complimentary lecture I also uploaded in the beginning of this week, then how we define economic geography is the result of this pluralism, these different disciplines coming together in a constructive manner to boost theoretically and empirically one economic geography. And to truly embrace sustainability issues and address the grand societal challenges, a multidisciplinary approach is required. It's not only me that I'm telling that. A number of researchers, such as those I have here, call for this multidisciplinary engagement. But then this also what I call here the positionality. Remember the last lecture I mentioned to you that I very much like to see in these short essays, less on academic article, how researchers position themselves in the discussion. If you position yourself more from an environmental point of view, more from an economicist point of view, it's important to bring that forward. So it helps to grasp how you position yourself into the discussion. And this very much, in my viewpoint, reflects a little bit your background and how you embrace domains of society. And again, this is also related with the social constructivism of the learning. These concepts, even those more, you may think them more objective, like defining evolution economic geography, very objective. Maybe there's some abstract elements. There's a lot of theoretical thinking, but there is a background that influenced Ron Bosman and Robert Hassink to write about evolution economic geography. So our background influences very much the way we write the things, the way we approach certain subjects, even if we embrace the scientific method, and so being more objective, more neutral, avoid being too normative. Means we are not, as researchers, it is not our goal to contribute to policies. We can be invited to contribute, but ultimate goal is to contribute to scientific developments. But our background influences the way we approach certain subjects, and that's why it's important to embrace a critical thinking when we are addressing specific issues. And that's this is the message I leave here for you to take, and then try to write your essay with this, embracing this critical thinking without neglecting how you position yourself into the discussion. That's what I want to underline here. That is important, and use that to grasp better the concept and the interrelationships between concepts and between one specific issues. And so this basically that's what we are doing in Kiel within the economic geography group. We position ourselves more less on, for example, political economy. We approach economic geography through the lenses of evolutionary economic geography, relational economic geography. So that's how we position ourselves in the discussion of economic geography. And then now we try to build the bridges through other disciplines with sustainable development goals. And again, it's not only about scientific research, academic research that stands by itself out there in these popular journals. Eventually, some of us are able to contribute to policy making, or at least with guidelines, for example, for the European cohesion policy or European agricultural common policy. But the aim of this slide and those that are come next is that we, as individuals, as citizens, we also play a role in scaling up, in accelerating everyday life towards a more sustainable path. That's why it's a collective endeavor. It's not only based on what we write as researchers, as students, but also what we do. Our diets, what kind of diet we follow, certainly influences or contributes to a more sustainable, in ecological terms, development path towards the future. So we all play a role in this process. More dramatically, those economic players that are key responsible for the global supply chains, they play a determining role in this transition towards sustainable development patterns. If you have been watching the conversations in Glasgow, you certainly heard these two words, supply chains, many times, and then how these aims of regionalizing supply chain. So making the supply chains less global but more localized can contribute to address the climate change. For that to happen, we need to accelerate context-sensitive energy transitions it is across the world, involving developed and less developed countries. And that's the issue. That's the issue involving economic geography, uneven developments, that not all the countries are able to move towards more sustainable paths of developments. And this requires understanding all these components that involve, for example, a production of a crop. We have the example of cocoa. Only few countries in the world are able or have the resource, have the potential, and that is called in land use science the land capability of producing cocoa. But the largest exporters, curiously, are not those that produce it. So when we are addressing cocoa supply chain from economic geography point of view, we can analyze the production, the countries, the where of the production, the consumption, with consumption consuming more cocoa in raw or in after transformation, the distribution, but it's also fundamental. And here the linkage to sustainability, understanding the impacts of this production in the local communities, in the labor force, in the human rights, and in the livelihoods, and understanding the impact of this discourse of transition towards development paths, what the impact of this discourse have on the local livelihoods, maybe completely changing, regionalizing supply chains will have a tremendous negative impact on local communities. So it's important to understand at hand those synergies and trade-offs. That's the next approach I will be talking to you later on. So that's why makes the addressing these issues of climate change and sustainability transition so complex, because we are all can come very optimistically with very nice discourses like those on Sunday afternoon in Glasgow, that yeah, we are lagging behind, it's time to act. But then all is important to assess, to have a clear understanding of the impacts of accelerating this transition. I'm not telling that we should not accelerate. Definitely we should accelerate this transition, but it's important to understand the real impacts of this transition, to not hidden the gap between developed and developing countries, because completely changing these supply chains will certainly have a high impact on local communities. It's important to come with measures that can minimize these trade-offs. So doing a study on cocoa supply chains requires understanding of the environmental protection laws, the human rights, and understanding the pillars of the livelihoods of local communities. The same goes on the if we try to disentangle these deforestation hotspots and the economical causes of this deforestation. And it's very interesting to compare, for example, the deforestation hotspots in Amazon with those that are the largest producers of beef in the world. So, okay, this involves high-hand politics. Involves high-hand politics, and indeed they play a determining role in accelerating deforestation and also in contracting it, being in South America or in Central Africa. But ourselves as a consumers, we also have a role to play here. That's why I call collective endeavor. So we have as a consumers, we have the responsibility to embrace more sustainable ways of consuming goods and accessing certain services. But not all the time we do not have access to the real data in the real time. That's also one of the concerns, and many of my colleagues write precisely that the lack of data leads to some misunderstandings or somehow blocks or hinders the capacity of society to change to change their behavior towards those that can contribute better to sustainable developments in near future. And then we still have a number of uneven development process and regional inequalities, and those that are that are consuming more of the goods that provoke or contribute directly or indirectly to deforestation are less impacted by it. So the countries suffering the most are not necessarily those that consume the most of the beef they produce. And so the cattle production, it contributes directly and indirectly to deforestation. There are a number of studies that tell that to what extent, for example, the European Union contributes indirectly to deforestation, means because Europe is a large consumer of beef, indirectly contribute to deforestation. This is a topic that can be explored from an environmental science point of view or from economic geography point of view. And the same goes to understanding the governance and the politics behind these supply chains. And it's important to understand what is going on to address these grand societal challenges. Deforestation, for example. So there are a number of countries coming together in some sort of agreements, alliances to make the supply chains more sustainable. There are a number of protocols, and there are countries themselves trying to also minimize the negative impacts of these globalized supply chains, being these in ecological terms or in social terms. And we have the German supply chain law. Some of the students last year, they decided to write about this development of the supply chain in Germany, and the aim is mainly to balance or to minimize the regional inequality involving the production of in the garment industry, in the textile sector overall speaking, involves less commodity crops from agriculture, but more other kind of industrial activities. Again, you can tell, yes, we have a role to play as a consumers, but we lack agency. What's the meaning of this agency? We lack this capacity of acting. We have limited resources. Well, we nowadays, with the development of digital platforms, podcasts, video making, for example, social media activity, we can all try to convey a positive message. And sometimes this is only about, or can be taken as a starting point. Enacting a discourse is fundamental. I have been discussing this with recently about the usefulness of the COP26 in Glasgow, for example. There are a lot of critics towards it, that all these politicians come together to say very nice words with very few actions in practice, and the mainstream media, they fail to convey us all the agreements that are discussing in the parallel rooms. But on the other hand, a number of critics, they also tell is important at least to accelerate a changing discourse. Sometimes activating this discourse is also is essential to bring about some change. So from these courses, then we can have an action plan, so we can start framing actions. So it's important to use the resources we have and can afford to use to convey positive message that a new a sustainable development path is possible. Some of us economic geographers, we have been engaging with these more grand societal challenges, and we have been trying to explore the linkage between a classic economic geography approach to the more the issues at stake. So, and when we do it, that's the meaning of this flux of in the background of the slide. When we do it, it's important to understand the networks and the linkage, the flows across space, because the European Union needs Southeast Asia for ships and for other kind of equipment for the automobile sector, and North America needs resources from Africa, and Africa needs also to place that resources in other markets. So it's important to understand the all these relationships, the flux across spaces or across scales, if you being a bit more specific in terms of the geographical location, and is essential to understanding how all of this is organized in the space, what kind of actors play the key role in this organization, the institutions in charge of somehow controlling or paving the way for these economic flux across spaces. And what's the concept of, or the paradigm, better, of evolution economic geography tell us, first builds on bringing together economic evolution economics from the neoclassic theory of the economics with geographic thinking. And his sense is that in both in evolutionary economic thinking and evolution economic geography, history and the geography are taken seriously. So when we are understanding economic actions, economic process, whatever you want to call, economic activities in a space, we have to look to these place-specific elements that can impact, can frame, can help to reframe these economic activities. The place-specific means the elements that in that specific territory impact this organization, maybe a number of law, maybe the forthcoming or already ongoing German supply chain law will now impact organization of the supply chains involving the textile sector. Maybe this supply chain law will be expanded to other countries. So it's important to have a place specific analysis of the issues at stake. That's what evolution economic geography tells us, and how we reach this conceptualization, the result of the combination of classic economics, neo-Schumpeterian school, so the concepts related to innovation and entrepreneurship that have been contributing to how we define economic geography these days, the roles of institutions, of power, of agency in deciding about specific issues. So a number of disciplines came together to shape and reshape evolutionary economic geography. And this reference I have here, Hassink, Bard and Shepard, and those earlier, Ron Bosman, they are the key reference worldwide in this entire evolution economic geography. And we have this engaged pluralism, this coming together of disciplines in a constructive manner to help to strengthen theoretically and empirically evolutionary economic geography. Trying to come with some definitions by important and renewed authors, Martin and Sunley and Hansik again. They tell us that economic geography examines and explains, and I cite, the process by which the economic landscape or the spatial organization of the economic production, circulation, exchange, distribution, and consumption is transformed from within over time. So we pay attention to dependencies within this time. And what's the essence when we are doing evolution economic geography? And I mean, when we are conducting research within economic geography, a time span is essential here. It's important to have a starting date and a end date. Or you can start in after the Second World War, for example. There was most of the common research within evolution economic geography, or from the Industrial Revolution, for example, and having the current time, for example, or the 2020 here. So we have a starting point in terms of time and the end time, so you can understand the evolution of the organization of the economic landscape. And to do that, we use specific concepts. We use the path dependence, we use lock-in process, and with these proximity concepts, where these proximity concepts underlines that being close to each other helps the evolution. So industries that are close to each other, they help each other to evolve. That's why we have dynamics of industrial clusters that explore the elements of this proximity. That's why we have discussions within innovation within large metropolitan areas that tell that creative industries, the fact that they are located in one mega region, Berlin, Hamburg, London, New York, Chicago, they help each other to evolve evolve or to co-evolve. Not necessarily, they don't have necessarily to share a common ground in terms of technology. And there is also the lock-in concept. Let me try to disentangle these two in the minutes that we have before the break. So the path-dependent process, and I can refer to the slide, is one whose outcome evolves because of the process of systems' own history. So historical developments are important to understand how a specific, for example, firm, industry, or region, what characterizes them in today. It's important to look at the history. And we have cases where these industries located in a specific region, they follow a specific development path. So they stick to that path. They start, for example, by developing I'll call it classic textiles, shirts, t-shirts, or tableware, for example. And then they boost their capacity, their know-how in how to deal with textile. This is very common in monostructural industrial regions. We have the case, for example, northern Portugal, parts of Italy that are highly specialized in textiles. So as a path, they follow a path that brings them always to invest in this textile industry. Nowadays, we have a number of so-called technical textiles also in these specific regions. So they are exploring this more innovative way of dealing with textiles, maybe um, um, anti-rain, for example, is a specific name which I don't recall at the moment. More specific and technical, evolved textiles. So their past, their historical development, their capacity to deal with textiles helped them to solidify their position at the moment as being at the forefront in the development of technical textiles, more evolved, incorporating more research and development. So there is a positive way of understanding this path dependent. In some other contexts, being too much dependent of one industry can lead to the collapse if they are not capable of integrating innovation and research within their production processes. There are also a number of examples involving the shipbuilding in parts of Europe and in Asia as well. And when we are talking about this incapacity of breaking with the path, we can describe this as being a lock-in, which is they are very historical contingent. They have historical contingency elements, so they are linked to a specific place. And when a certain industry is not capable of breaking that path, we use the term or the notion of lock-in to characterize these economic aspects of the industry. This can happen at the industry level and can also happen at the regional level. There are a number of regions that they find themselves locked in processes to the point they are not capable of breaking this historical development path to embrace other activities. Fortunately, research and developments, innovation policies, for example, from the European Union, smart specialization, they have been developed with a goal of breaking the locks and help these regions to overcome to overcome this state of being locked in development processes. I think I have a couple of examples here. So this process of lock-in and path developments, they happen mostly in old industrial areas where they are mainly monostructural areas, so they are only devoted to one specific activity. For example, steel, coal mining, shipbuilding. There are not many other activities that can, for example, absorb labor force. So they stick to this type of industry, but for some reasons like globalization, now sustainability transitions can lead to ultimately can lead to the collapse of this industry, and they are not capable of breaking this lock-in. They are highly specialized in specific products, in specific goods, so let them to be locked in process, and then a number of policies are required to absorb the labor force, and sometimes this increased migration patterns towards other geographies. So we are talking about highly specialized activities, again, in mono-industrial regions that only focus in one specific region. This involves textile, shoemaking, for example, heavy industry, steel, and shipbuilding. Something, an example here, not necessarily not related with the literature on the evolutionary economic geography. That idea is to try to help to disentangle this lock-in process. If we think about ourselves, sometimes ourselves we also feel locked in processes. Maybe you want to apply for a job that requires specific language skills that we do not have, so we are locked in. We have some sort of incapacity to go beyond that requirement and really embrace that activity. So this can hinder our job search. Maybe some of us, we do not have the IT capacities to embrace one or another activity. So we feel ourselves locked in that process. This happens, and this happens happens very often in developing countries, where they are these countries that are not capable to follow the pace of development in terms of technology, for example, of the developed world. And before the break, to conclude on the regional lock-ins, there are examples, there are positive examples of industries they were able to move from this traditional way of dealing with one mono industry, for example, shoemaking, and incorporate technology. But you may already start thinking about, okay, this is possible because of what? There are maybe the strength of the entrepreneur plays a role here. Uh, for them to reach this level capacity of integrating technology, for example, and improving the shoemaking industry, they need to incorporate findings from research and development. Okay, but they don't have all the economic resources to support research and development themselves. They need universities, and they need research centers. So the role of the governments here, even in the most neoliberal society, let's say North America, the state plays a role in financing research and development that leads to innovation policies and leads some industries to break this lock and evolve towards new activities. And this is now is becoming more popular when we talk about evolving from a traditional heavy single research to a green industry, to a green technology, by incorporating renewable sources of energy. Examples in the literature from Germany and South Korea, where they characterize the how in some geographies such as Germany, they were in some locations they were able to overcome this lock-in of being so specialized in one industry, how they were able to exit this process and embrace economic renewal that helped them to absorb labor force. And all right, we'll do a break here before continuing our journey to understanding the evolutionary economic geography and the linkage with sustainable development. So we'll have now until more or less 10 minutes break, and I will see you after 10 minutes. So in 2 minutes we'll come back to the lecture, but if someone is already online and would like to pose a question to me or to the audience, please feel free to bring it, and then we'll continue to the second part. So, all right, let's continue with our lecture for the second part, and recording is on. Okay, so here the essence of this slide is that when we are talking about evolution, economic geography is the historical process, is essential to understand the uneven development or the inequalities involving the transformation of the economic landscape. And there are a number of concepts that have been contributing to this evolution economic geography, and I will not go into depth on general Darwinism. There is a number of publications explaining that, the political economy, more those that I approach it through a geographical point of view. And I consider that the evolution economic geography offers the concepts that are particularly relevant when we are discussing social sustainability, being this related to labor force, for example, related to simple process of economic developments, although with social impacts. And there are a number of concepts, very much more up-to-date concepts related to evolution economic geography. And here are the key ones with the key references: regional innovation systems. That this is kind of concept that within the model of evolution economic geography I explore in more in depth. Um, location opportunity, all industrial areas, and how to overcome that lock-in processes. This also implies talking about the dynamics within clusters. I mean, within a specific geographical location, holding a number of industries that share or a common technology, or they are within the same type of market. And we have then innovation policies and place-based policies, for example, coming from supra-state entities such as the European Union, smart specialization that can also help to grasp this evolution of the economic activities, economic processes through time. And bringing all of this together in one question, Martin and Sunley, they do that. Uh, a central question within evolution economic geography is try to understand why some regional economies become locked into development processes. We already mentioned before that this is more related with a mono-industrial structure, with a specialization in one type of goods or industry that lose dynamics, the economic dynamic, whilst other regional economies are able to avoid this trap, to avoid lock-ins, or when they enter a lock-in process, is also interesting to explore why they were able to overcome this lock-in process. There's a number of studies published in those journals I mentioned to in the first lecture, exploring the issue. And some of economic geographers, they do not only follow this pattern of understanding to what extent evolution economics impact economic geography, but also the other way around, to what extent having a larger understanding of geography, which sometimes requires you to explore concepts more related with regional geography, regional studies, influence also the economic evolution. Maybe the players, I mean the actors, and many times private actors, those that are with the goals of profit, they have such a strong capacity. They are able to influence economic policies, for example. So a number of geographers, they are also concerned in understanding these theoretical and empirical dynamics involving the economy and the geography, and to what extent one influences the dynamics of the other. But that's not exactly where I want to go towards this second part of the lecture. But I still have to underline what it entails to do evolutionary economic geography, or to do research within economic geography from an evolutionary economic perspective. Okay, we have here a case which I also bring in one of my lectures in regional geography, the one where I talk about Southern Europe and European integration. So we can have an analysis of what you have here in front of your screen is low growth regions within the European Union, or low income, also low income regions. We can do a regional geography analysis here. So we look, okay, these regions are located in Southern Europe. They have a specific demographic type. They are within a specific demographic topology. In terms of physical conditions, they are, most of them, they are not landlocked. They have extensive coastal areas. Okay, this type of analysis that you will do in regional geography. And the type of analysis you will do in evolutionary economic geography is to look at what is going on these days. That's the scenario we have. And what we put here, we put questions of governance, we put questions of cohesion policy, because they belong to a supranational institution, the European Union. And the European Union, since the institutionalization of it, has been providing funding for these regions. So it's important to understand why they are still somehow locked in this low growth pattern. So the kind of analysis that you will do in evolutionary economic geography, what kind of elements can help us to explain why Portugal as an entire territory, except the greater Lisbon metropolitan area, are still lagging behind in terms of economic growth. Okay, they receive very solid and extensive package of funding from the European, from the cohesion fund, and from the regional funding schemes as well. The same goes if we focus more on the parts of Spain, or southern Italy, or Greece. Okay, it's interesting to understand all these elements, political policies, political decisions, governance arrangements, and also understand the failures of these policies. They, all these regions, they have the at hand, or they are still benefiting from smart specialization policy, for example, from the European Union. How to explain that they still incapable of following what is going, the development patterns of Central Europe. Others criticize, okay, they do not really have to to copy and paste what is going on in Central Europe, or in the Nordic, or in another Nordic region. They have their own distinctive elements. Indeed, they do have. They are specialized in certain industry, or certain economic activities, in tourism, in textiles. Indeed, and maybe they can just continue their own development path, and then we bring other economic geography related concepts, such as slow innovation, which are somehow, in my viewpoint, and also backed with some research which you have in your lab, are more sympathetic towards sustainable developments, slow innovation, mission-oriented policies, which we have in our final lecture. There are process of corporate social responsibility as well. So the policies, actually, they are policies from the European Union. They are helping them to overcome certain locked in processes, but all of this takes a lot of time. They are certainly in a much better position today than they were 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, Portugal was a dictatorship. So certainly the things changed dramatically. Still, there are this understanding, this transformation of the economic landscape through time is a time-consuming process, and then to truly understand these regional dynamics, we need a number of we need extensive data, and go beyond the economic aspects. If you only embrace economic aspects or economic thinking, we certainly will fail to truly address their prime structural issues. And I'm talking about a population of about 83 million inhabitants, so a quite dynamic region if you put them all together, area, regional geography in Europe. And doing, again, evolutionary economic geography, you can do it all together in a more globalized perspective, but we are always called to narrow down our ideas, and there are analyses at the macro level, involve a spatial scale, a meso level, involve a sector of activity, a network, a cluster, or can also involve a more micro level, for example, firm, a specific, a context-specific industry in one specific location, and understanding, for example, routines means that how they deal with production processes, what kind of mechanisms they use to go from production to the distribution. So a number of elements that you can do at a micro level. And the path dependency as a concept which I bring here to try to complement a little bit what I've been saying before, and to underline that history matters when we are trying to understanding these economic dynamics in specific locations. History matters, and understanding process across scales is also fundamental to understand the dynamics of the economic landscape. And together with that, other researchers tell, okay, history matters. There are path dependencies. Some of regions and industries, they are capable of somehow keep following that development path, but innovate here and there in the components that help them to evolve. And of course, policies and entrepreneurial capacity, regulatory arrangements by laws and other type of mechanisms, innovation process, they also help them to embrace economic renewal, to embrace structural change. For example, when we have regions that go from industry to a service-oriented economy, for example. So it's a lot of dynamics that is interesting to analyze from an evolutionary economic point of view. Now, finally, you may say that I'm trying to enter here a more sustainable approach within the evolutionary economic geography. Not much time left anyway, but you already know, if I'm not able to complete the lecture, I will then record a complementary lecture to explain the slides and the concepts I planned earlier. So when we are talking about energy transition, although it sounds a very current concept, and it is indeed, everybody's talking about from in the European Union corridors, in Glasgow as well, but some countries are already quite advanced in comparison to others. Why? Evolutionary economic geography may be a useful concept to understand how historical processes have been helping some countries to do this transition from non-renewable resources to renewable resources. So understanding these dynamics, these experiences, this practice, these routines, this capacity to deal with, for example, with wind, may be used to explain energy transition, and eventually to help to accelerate a transition to to renewable sources of energy in production process. Also, the other another opposite situation occur. We have, for example, institutions that they are interested in maintaining the development path. There are a number of institutions, such as the OPEC here, for example, that they are certainly interested in maintaining the high consumption of non-renewable resources. So there are, and this is the historical process and the aims of institutions, in this case for profit, justify the maintenance of one region, of one country. Here we are talking more about countries within a region that are interested in remaining in that development path. Of course, some researchers point out there are incremental innovations along the way. So not necessarily telling here that, okay, they stick to oil and to the use of non-renewable resources, but okay, they might use the economic benefits from oil to explore other type of innovations. And Norway, for example, is doing that while still exploring oil, has been trying to develop it and financing energy transition in some of the metropolitan, their urban areas. So there are a number of incremental innovations that can evolve in parallel to other kind of activities. That's what we call co-evolution. And but it is not only related with energy transition, with non-renewable, renewable resources. Discussion can also go from can also touch upon on tourism activity and understanding why, despite all the findings telling that mass tourism is negative, it creates impacts on the local communities. Then forces people to resettle elsewhere because of this privatization of the housing sector. Despite all of these calls for the negativity, that we still have these large movements of tourists. Well, this probably more in the non-COVID context. So is also interesting to analyze not only how certain regions or industries break these paths, but why they also stay and prefer to remain in that development path. So there are a number of regions of factors influencing that, and sometimes the institutions and actors play a role in this context. So currently, evolution economic geography is much more concerned with issues of governance arrangements and understanding the transition to more sustainable ways of development. It touches upon concepts of resilience. I mean, it's preparing the territories to overcome in a more easier way situations of lock-in, of catastrophe, for example. So there are a number of more up-to-date research that try to find finding ways to use more classic concepts to avoid current issues. And this involves technicality, involves understanding high tech, innovation, technology with more economic paradigms. And also all of this research is being conducted in Europe and elsewhere. I think we are still in the complex standpoint, and then a lot of directions can be taken here, uh, and then we still relying very much on the experts to at least again accelerate the type of discourse. And what I want to underline here, so we do this step towards a more environmental aspect within economic geography, that many things happens in our realm, in our society, because of the capacity of research institutions to bring or to shape some of the discourses. And this is all very much about putting issues at stake. So when we call the research gaps that you will identify in your essays, so very much the evolution of these disciplines of economic geography rely on this capacity of identifying the gaps and proposing ways of overcoming that. And these authors here, they start thinking about, okay, evolution economic geography is really interesting if we want to understand how the more environmental aspects have been evolved through time, and they start writing about how the more environmental science domain can combine, can co-construct in a constructive and creative way, can play with the evolution economic geography. So they, from evolution economic geography, they evolve towards environmental and evolutionary economic geography. And they highlight that one will benefit from the other. So while environmental economic geography will benefit from the social economic evolutionary perspective, and evolution economic geography will will gain or will become a stronger discipline or paradigm if incorporates more environmental concerns. Still, I was not so that's still, it is not so solid developed this evolutionary economic geography, and that's probably the reason why I decided to bring it here. So you have the knowledge now that such an approach exists, but the Nexus approach to me helps to grasp the sustainability issues more into depth. And but there is still this transition or this incorporation of environmental aspects within economic geography is still very much ongoing, and is try to understand the economic factors, the impact of economic factors within the environment. And all of this is also the result of international agendas. Again, I remember in the beginning I said, even if we find meaningless the words of these political leaders in Glasgow, at least the starting point that having these international debates can help us, researchers, students, yourselves, maybe you are engaged with grassroots movements or organizations at university. We yesterday received the sustainable Kiel sustainable city debates. Sometimes these debates, they also help to accelerate the discourse, and maybe that is also influences, for example, those institutions that can grant you scholarships. So it's important. I share this opinion that it's important to have these debates to accelerate one discourse that can put us towards a more sustainable organization of the economic landscape. So the things happen in an organic manner, and it's all about, and these all take time, because coming out with these findings, or through published academic journals, or through policy debates, everything takes quite a lot of time. But now we are, and if you go on Google Scholar and write economic geography and capitalize it between question citation marks, you will find a number of recent publications, and this clearly highlights all this evolution I've been talking to you, not going through it in an exhaustive manner. So we have the industrial evolution, evolve through the integration of information and technology. There are different kind of terminologies. We are talking about private property, then we evolve to rethinking of the commons. And if you are familiar with the commons, you remember that Eleanor Ostrom received a Nobel Prize because of doing research within the commons. And now we have discussions between private and the common sector. We have NGOs trying to influencing environmental discussions, and from a national local discourse within in the beginning of the 20th century, we now talk about global, local, and I will put again global and local again. So we have a number of exchanges, and this involves very much the supply chains of goods. And we have, of course, now the evolution towards green entrepreneurship, green industries, green markets. So there's always an evolution of discourses that sometimes back it up through policies. Maybe some others are still lacking a policy to sustain the discourse. Maybe some of the discourse, they just remain as a discourse, as a narrative out there, waiting for some of us, for me, for you, for your colleagues, to eventually take it and try to develop it. But again, we may need some resources, we may need some grants, scholarships, but we all know these are also limited, and not all of us are capable, even if we really have this strong desire of writing about it, or sometimes even writing in a blog. We also, yeah, we lack the resources to really do it. That's why I underline that we can use the resources we have at hand, and then eventually someone will be able to take them forward and maybe influence some policies to try to address these grand societal challenges. And they are various, and we certainly have been discussing these in other models. Some of them, they are more related with food security, and again, this can be approached through economic geography, through planning, through sociology as well. A lot of these issues involving the energy transition, transportation and mobility in general, housing accessibility and affordability, but also other social issues related to equality, fairness of the world, fairness of the distribution of the economic activities within space. All interesting topics to explore. And then if I bring them more close to economic geography, how you can, for example, think about aging population as a grand societal challenging, and the relation with economic geography. You can think about, okay, so what's going to happen to the markets with the aging of the population? What will, how in this context of globalization, place-based approach regulations can influence the supply chains, for example. To what extent can we continue talking about competitiveness when most of these issues, climate change and inequalities, are still very dramatic around the world? And yes, indeed, we still have a lot of competitiveness discourses out there. So it's important to start building this bridge sometimes in the areas that are less common. But I think that's where the beauty of doing research or exploring alternative practice lies is in exploring the what it eventually sounds less less sound that sounds less sound to be grasped in. And there are continue uh, within the society in terms of finance and public debt, and a number of issues that can be explored from economic geography point of view. So the challenge here is to combine both these societal challenges and evolutionary economic geography, or economic geography in generally. I mentioned to you the environmental evolutionary economic geography is one of the possibilities. They try to combine here these both aspects, but there are also a number of economic geographies devoting more to innovation policies, and to what extent innovation, which is a core a core of economic geography from since Schumpeter and the development of the entrepreneurialism, to what extent these innovation policies can help to address some of the failures of the economic of the traditional classic economic organization. So still, all of this still very new and still under development, and there are a number of gaps that can be explored within the combination of social sustainability issues with the economic geography. And now that we have only some few minutes left, I'm also feeling myself going down in my own capacity of exploring these very well, certainly the results of the model before, but try not to failing you here. And again, we have innovation policies, the integration of environmental issues, and then this have been influencing what we have now in Europe, the Green Deal, also in Canada and the US. There are a number of research trying to explore how industries can become more green in their production and distribution of aspects. And when, if you focus, some of you are particularly concerned with urban and region development, there are a number of concepts that are particular that try to merge this economic geography and more the physical planning. And we talk about degrow, means this really counteract classical economic development models within the society. So there is a strong player, I mean, it's a strong call for economic geographers to engage with environmental issues, with grand societal challenges, with grand societal challenge and environmental and sustainability issues being these social, economic, or ecological environmental. And a number of researchers have been calling for this interaction. And what's the starting point we have here? We have the Sustainable Development Goals as a starting point for this interrelationship between economic geography and sustainability. And I will skip it now here for the sake of the time. I will skip these slides. I will then record a complementary lecture from this slide to the one I will go today, because I want you to go back home with by wrapping up the nexus approach. And why I'm talking about the nexus approach when we talk about the evolution economic geography. So I was less or more concerned about the exploring these environmental slash evolution economic geography, and I really went out there to find an approach that called merge economic geography and sustainability issues more in concrete. So I'll use these last 10 minutes, then I will recap in a complementary lecture during the week, touching here the nexus approach. And if you read the article, you will be able to grasp this more easily. The paper talks about synergies and trade-offs. I talked about this also in the beginning. It means that the progress in one goal favors the progress in another, and the trade-off here, the idea is to find these trade-offs and transform them into synergies. But we also have a definition of trade-offs in which they'll progressing in one of these specific sustainable development goals. And the starting point that I assume that you partly know these sustainable development goals hinders the progress in another one. And they tell that the Nexus approach can help to enhance sustainability pathways through promoting higher research use efficiency, lower production of pollutants, for example. And it requires the involvement of different sectors, different players, different skills, and different regions. Okay, and the next approach, the idea is to try to explore synergies involving the personalization of the 17 development goals and the 169 targets linked to these sustainable development goals. And you find this in these publications, all of these blue reference here, they have links that lead you to the publications. And the essence of this article, the Nexus approach, and they bring together three domains that are essential for us to live in a society: food, water, and energy. Because it was very, very strategically chosen. And what the Nexus approach tells is that, okay, we can embrace food security, for example, by itself independently is necessary in both developed and developing countries. And energy, the same can stand itself as a domain requiring research. But if we do an integrated approach, if we do a nexus approach, I mean, combining them in one domain, then we'll be able to explore synergies, and then we'll be able to operationalize a large number of the sustainable development goals. Of course, this here is challenging to find three other vectors or three other domains of society that can truly uh, have this kind of output, a diagram that almost fulfills all the development goals in this context. And what the authors do, they try to explore the synergies, and they propose ways of reducing the trade-offs that exist involving them. And then in the economic geographical perspective, okay, I'm always trying to look for frameworks, and then the best way, for example, in your essay, to disentangle one issue. And I've had some of your colleagues coming to me last year with the issue of organizing the idea. And I always suggest, okay, try to come with a framework. And if you come with a framework, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, it's somehow always easier to start narrowing down the idea. And they have done this through the Sustainable Development Goals. We can do that through other kind of initiatives. Remember that I referred to one earlier in the lecture last week, and we also have the World in 2050. They try to explore the interrelationship between very distinctive elements between the smart cities and the consumption and production. Here are very strong economic components on this initiative that can, if approached together, can help to operationalize the sustainable development goals. And the elements that you will not find sharply or as they are here in these publications is how I try to operationalize this idea of the synergies and trade-off. For example, if you talk about dematerializing the production of consumption, okay, making it less attached to economic values, then you have the degrow concept, and so requires exploring synergies within the degrow concept. If we try about regionalizing production systems, means regionalizing supply chains instead of having these globalized supply chains of agriculture, of commodity crops, for example. We try to rethink ways of feeding the market, feeding Europe, for example, but through the regions, through production that is place-based, that is located within the boundaries of Europe, without neglecting how the developing countries, those that are used to supply the chain of commodity products, will then survive. So I think I found this very, very interesting, and all of this requires again to be explored. And most of these elements, they help to operationalize the goal number 8, 9, and 12. And there are certain concepts within economic geography that are more clear than others. Degrow already with a strong body of literature. Place-based strategies already also very strongly developed by economic geographies and others. More concrete on the synergies involving this operationalization of the goals and economic geography aspects. I try to develop this in a way that makes it clear that, for example, the progress, how we, if we want to achieve progress in the economic development goal number 8, for example, through networks. So we can use these networks, this cooperation between firms, to decrease the consumption of natural resources. If they share resources, if they share facilities, sometimes even in physical terms, or and I mean about building itself, or mechanisms or equipments, even transportation. So they will certainly be able to contribute to operationalization of the goal number 13. Let's think about other, if we rethink the emerging markets and the production system, global diffusion of innovations. What the meaning of this? If there is this tendency of the countries that are pioneers in certain innovations, and we have this discussion involving the COVID-19 vaccine, for example. If we make these patents, not necessarily involving vaccines, but involving the use of batteries in the automobile sector, if there is a common understanding to make these innovations, they use public money anyway. If we make them common, we certainly be able to address, to operationalize the goal number 12 and contribute to reduce poverty, because those countries that do not have the capacity to invest in research and development, they will be able to benefit from the patents developed in other countries, those that have the resources. If we make this innovation common, not locked in specific borders of institutions, of countries, of universities, then we'll certainly be able to address the poverty globally. That's the goal here in the globally terms. Of course, some of these issues require, they are not as straightforward as you find them here in the slides. It's necessary they have impacts in other domains, and then we may question that to what extent making these patents common will help no poverty. If they have no mechanisms to operationalize them, then okay, we have to come up with measures that can help the less favored countries or regions in the world to benefit from them. And instead of having these generalized discussions in these climate conferences, we'll have concrete decision making, helping to operationalize this transition towards the sustainable developments. And in the trade-offs, an example here that is probably more easy to understand. With the trade-offs, the way they explain the trade-offs, however, there are other types of definition of trade-offs. And if you read environmental science literature, you will find other types of definitions of trade-offs. Let's think about the COVID-19 measures implemented or suggested by the World Health Organization. So the frameworks provided by them or by countries, they are certainly very relevant, or they were very useful, or they are still on, as the cases continue to develop, to progress in the good health and well-being in the global terms. But then we can also think about them as very restrictive. Many of the factories of the garment industry in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, they were forced to close. So because of these frameworks that helped benefited that benefited developed societies, they hinder the progress these countries are doing, for example, in the target 8.5 of the global number of the goal number 8. This is certainly a momentary, a temporary situation, but on one what the meaning of this, that positive positive changes in one domain, for example, can dramatically impact others if measures if the necessary measures to avoid or to avoid a collapse, or to seek a balance between them, are not implemented in concrete. I'm aware that this may sound very massive at the moment, and to be explored only in one lecture. Now we have only a few seconds to go, and then hopefully you are still satisfied with the content of the lecture, and I will then compensate the slides that I've skipped with a complementary lecture explaining why we arrived in this discussion, which the essence is again I was able to touch the concept of evolutionary economic geography, how we evolved and integrated other concepts with the Nexus approach. And I can stay here to hear some of your questions and answering those questions if you have them. And of course, keep an eye on the OLAT group for updates. Thank you so much, and I wish you a good rest of the week. And hopefully, I will see you all next Wednesday. Any question about the essay or the content of the lecture? All right. So thank you so much, and have a nice week.